housekeeping. If anybody is on board for item 54, that is the acceptance of the Portland Police Bureau's report to the City Council on the 2022 Portland Joint Terrorism Task Force report. If there's anybody waiting to hear that this morning, I just want you to be aware that we will not be hearing that when we get to that item. I will be pulling that back to my office for 1 week. So if you're standing by waiting with the hope of hearing that, it will not be heard today. And I apologize for the inconvenience on that front. The first item today is a pre-gavel proclamation to recognize the disastrous impact of the volcanic eruption, tsunami, and ash that's devastated the Tongan community. I want to thank Commissioner Mapps and Commissioner Hardesty for bringing this proclamation forward. Today, we're going to hear from a couple of members from the Tongan community who live here in the Portland area. But before that, I'd like to pass it off to Commissioner Hardesty and then Commissioner Mapps to introduce our guests. Good morning, Commissioner Hardesty.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. And let me start by thanking Commissioner Mapps for actually leading the effort to bring this proclamation to the Council. It is what a horrible experience that this volcanic eruption was. 95% of the population, in fact, has been directly impacted by this tragedy. And I am happy that we here at the City Council are taking the time to really acknowledge both the people and the heritage and the devastation that's taken place. We have a very large Pacific Islander population here in the Portland metro area. And I know that, and I want them to know that my prayers are with them and their family members as they struggle through this disaster. And we will be there with them to help them as they recover. Thank you so much, Commissioner Mapps. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Colleagues, I am honored to join you in proclaiming January 26th, 2022 to be a Tongan Day of Remembrance here in Portland. With this proclamation, this council expresses our condolences and support for our Tongan friends and neighbors who have recently suffered a terrible tragedy. About 2 weeks ago, 40 miles north of the Tongan archipelago, a volcano erupted with the force of many atomic bombs. That eruption triggered a tsunami which swept over the islands of the Tongan archipelago. Since then, Tonga has been largely cut off from the world. Nearly 2 weeks later, Tongans have no electricity, internet access, or phone service. Because Tonga has gone silent, we are still learning about the extent of the damage and needs in that island nation. But we do know this: the wounds left by this catastrophe will run deep and will take years to heal. And that is why we are here today. This council brings forward this proclamation as a way to express our condolences, deep concern, and unwavering support for our Tongan neighbors. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the Kingdom of Tonga, let me provide a little background. Tonga is an island nation in the South Pacific, about 5,648 miles away from Portland. Despite that difference, Tonga is closer to Portland than you may realize. Tongans first started to settle in Portland in substantial numbers in the 1970s. Today, about 1,300 Portlanders have roots in Tonga. And today, Tongans are one of the fastest growing ethnic groups here in the Portland metro area, which means Tongans are not only an important part of Portland's past, Tongans will also be an important part of Portland's future. Portland and the Tongan community have a shared history which stretches back half a century, and those shared experiences are among the reasons why a natural disaster in Tonga resonates so deeply here in Portland. Today, I'm thinking about one thing in particular which Portlanders and the people of Tonga share in common. We both live in the shadows of volcanoes. Portlanders of a certain age will remember Mount St. Helens erupting in 1980. Tonga's current situation is like that. But they also have to deal with this. Imagine Mount St. Helens erupting, but then there's a tsunami 49 feet high. But instead of living in Portland, you live on a tiny, low-slung island in the middle of the Pacific during a pandemic. That is where Tonga is right now. The hearts of our Tongan neighbors are broken. I saw that pain with my own eyes this past Saturday when Commissioner Ryan and I, staff from the Office of Civic Life and the Police Bureau, attended a community event organized by IRCO, which brought Portland's Tongan community together to share stories of loss, fear, pain, and resilience. At that event, one Tongan Portlander told us about talking to her mom on the phone as the volcano erupted. Her mom said, "It's raining rocks and ash is falling right now." But by far the more common and frankly more terrifying experience was this. At least a dozen people with roots in Tonga shared stories about trying to call, text, or message a mom, dad, sister, brother, son, or daughter in the aftermath of a volcanic eruption followed by a tsunami, and they were not able to get through for days on end. That is the life our Tongan friends and neighbors are living right now. That is a unique and cruel form of torture. And that is why this council wants the Tongan community to know that Portland shares your pain and has your back. Now, here to tell us more about the current conditions, both in Tonga and here in Portland's Tongan community, we have Lute Richards, a full-blooded Tongan born and raised in American Samoa. Lute's community involvement in Portland began when she served as the Pacific Island Community Liaison with the Division Midway Alliance. Now, Lute serves as a youth and family advocate for the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. And we are also joined by Kulini Fusitua, who is also with IRCO, but wears many other hats, including serving on the City of Portland's New Portlanders Policy Commission, the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, and Metro's Park and Nature Equity Advisory Committee. Lute, Kulini, Balu Lia'a. Welcome, and please tell us more about how things are going back at your homeland.
Yeah, this is Colini. Good morning, everybody. I want to first give a thank you to the mayor and the city council for giving us an opportunity of member from the Tongan community to share what has been going on the last couple of weeks. And also, I want to have an acknowledgement and thank you to Commissioner Maps and Commissioner Odyssey for championing this event here today. Also, I want to give out a thank you to Commissioner Ryan for showing up and being in the circle of the community healing, as mentioned by Commissioner Maps. Just want to give you guys an update with what's going on in Tonga. The effect is still going on. There's support coming in from outside of the country, meaning New Zealand and Australia. They're shipping in supplies and so forth. Water's being contaminated, so they're shipping a lot of water, shipping a lot of food from there. Locally, fortunately, we had a community healing last week. It was very much needed for us to heal and for us to share our pain among ourselves, and also for outside of our community that wanted to support us to be there to show us their love and support. So it was a needed for all. And I can share what happened as Commissioner Mapp have shared how emotional it was, but you're not gonna get the full effect if you miss, being there, being present, and feeling the emotion and the tears. There's one of the testimony mentioned, we appreciate you being here. If you don't have resources, if you have no funding to give us after today, we are thankful that you are here to hear our pain. That is gift already. So to show appreciation for our community local leaders, that is huge for us. Um, what else is going on? We have created a core team. We have the city council joining us, New Portlander Policy Commission, City of Beaverton, and the other organization. Leader is part of this core team and brainstorming and sharing information, what resources is available, supplies to send back home, and what funding gets to be supported our local community and also back home. As mentioned with Commissioner Maps, a lot of our homes has been destroyed. Remember, we are from a third world country. Our homes are not insured. There's very few homes that are insured. So if a tsunami come and wipe out your entire home, you have nothing there. A slab of concrete is not even there. You absolutely have nothing. You're gonna rebuild from scratch, and that's the reality. People lost everything. Not only that, they have to relocate to other nearby islands. You know, this is a natural disaster. This is a climate refugee, status option, and this is huge. So I just want to give a thank you again to the mayor and the city council giving us an opportunity for our city here to hear and know who we are. The Tongan community has been here since the 70s, and we haven't had great relationship with the city, not because we didn't want to, we just didn't know how to be engaged. And the city did not know where to find us, but fortunately, within the last I'd say probably 7 years, we've started to build a relationship, Portland Parks, Port Police, and with the city council, and we're working on that relationship to continue. And we want to thank you again. And I think Commissioner Mapp's staff, we've requested that one of the bridges, if he is generous enough to show solidarity with our community, to be lit up with the Tongan flag color. So with that, just want to give back to the commission and say thank you. If you have any questions, feel free. Thank you. Lute.
Okay.
Hello. Malalele, Mayor Wheeler, and esteemed city commissioners, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Lute Filamohala Richards, and I am grateful to be here representing the Tongan community of Portland, Oregon. First and foremost, we thank the Almighty God for our leaders of our city and state and our beloved country of America. But by you recognizing our Tongan cultural and heritage to be known and studied within our neighboring communities, we take pride and celebrate it to the fullest since you proclaimed it back in August of 2019. Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, a recent massive volcano eruption to our small kingdom of Tonga caused us to be here again, but bring you and I together as community members. But here in Portland, Oregon, we come together since the event of community healing event last Saturday. talk amongst ourselves to see where we can start within ourselves first. Donating whatever necessary items that are essentials to collect, and that to put them in huge containers and then ship them to Tonga. But then when all that's done, the communities are like sitting down, oh, well, we can't manage to have the means to purchase the containers or the means to ship them out to Tonga. But all of that, we still have hope to where, and that's where we would like to see if we can ask for resources, just resources where we lead us to those, so that we community members can really help our families and the people back in Tonga. Volcanic ash fall is affecting air and water quality on the islands. For the needs for medicine and medical supplies is what's been talked amongst the community here. And I was told by my cousin's family, she's a second cousin, her family who lives in one of those islands, the people of Tonga end up having to swim back to the water to collect the clothes, that's little bits of clothing floating around on the water, because everything just gone. But whatever clothes they could find to bring them back to the shore and just dry them up to have a pair of change into. But the community here of the Tongan community here in Portland are really starting, like I said, to seek humanitarian aid efforts within our own capacity, but as with the in-person appearance of Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Max to our last week event, really brought hopes to the community. Once again, I say, city commissioners, is that they will, there's hopes to more resources where we can reach to. I would like to say that this volcanic eruption will greatly affect the global climate. While I don't have much time to dive deep into this topic, but I would just like to say that there will be long-lasting effects of including widespread crop damage to coral reefs, eroding coastlines, and disrupting fisheries. And all of these are just the only natural source of living and vital to the people of Tonga. And I was told this by my auntie who lives in Vatu, Tonga, about this. And so, lastly, I just want to say the King of Tonga express his thanks and appreciation to all the help and the aids and the support from overseas to bring relief to the Kingdom of Tonga. Mr. Mayor, I want to close by sincerely thanks the City of Portland, for the Portland City Council, for Tonga Proclamation. We are so honored and are very humble. This is like Christmas all over again to us community, Tongan community. From our city leaders for the heartfelt support in this proclamation. Commissioner Ryan and Max, we thank you for your state of leadership as well in support of our last week community healing event. And Commissioner Hardesty, and to the rest of you city council, this opportunity brings good hopes, like I said, again, to our Tongan community as we stand together to help not just the island of Tonga, but our city here and its richly diverse communities. Please let us know what the Tongan community can do to help our city and state here. We stay and stand ready. But overall, I thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both for being here today and sharing with us your experience. My question is there a trusted local organization that if community members wanted to send money to help? I'm always concerned when the Red Cross is the only organization, because I know they're only there for a couple of weeks and they continue to take all the money. is there a local organization? Is there a website that we can send people to and encourage them to donate directly to the Tongan community?
Yes, as of, excuse me, as of yesterday, we've confirmed and within the partners meeting with the core partners meeting, we've agreed to have New Portland Foundation be the fiscal agent. And that's with Show Disano, and we'll be taking on the fiscal agent role.
There's a foundation that's called, if you could give it to the court clerk so that we could make it part of the record. I'm unfamiliar with the foundation, but I think we want to encourage people to give to a trusted organization that you
Sure.
know will get the money to on the ground where it's needed, as compared to some of the international relief organizations.
Yes, and I'll be the main contact for all correspondence relating to the Tonga crisis, and I will forward information to your staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rubio, then Commissioner Ryan.
Oops. Thank you, Mayor. And then thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Mapps, and Commissioner Hardesty for creating this space for us to demonstrate our deep support for the Tongan community and the residents of Tonga, as well as Tongan community in Oregon and around the world. You're all in our hearts right now. And I really want to acknowledge the community leaders, Lute and Kolini, and all the others who are here today, despite being a very painful time. Thank you for your compassion and all the work that you're doing to bring healing to the community. These disasters have not only devastated the Kingdom of Tonga, but also, as you mentioned, creates a lot of concern for family members, fellow country people, and also loved ones around the world. And our heart aches for this. And also, but in the midst of this time, we're also seeing the beauty of community coming together in love and support. And that is very well represented by you today. And these things, along with your leadership in the community, has shown us in this time. It's a testament to the love, to the resiliency, to the strength that's very clearly rooted in your culture and your tradition and in your families. And that's very apparent. And so today we honor all these lives and sending energy and prayers, and also honor the love that binds this community, because we're all in this together and we're here for you. So again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here for us today and for this proclamation.
All right.
Yes, good morning. And first of all, Kolini and Lute, thank you for being here this morning. I have the pleasure of serving the city, and when you're in this role, you get invited to a lot of activities. And there are certain moments that I'll never forget, and one will truly be this past Saturday. Commissioner Mapps and I experienced the vulnerability, the openness, which is healing. The songs, I still have some of the songs in my head. I have no idea what the words were, but it didn't matter. It was the melody that made me feel like I was swaying with the trees and the wind and the breezes, and the prayers. It was gripping. And so thank you for that experience, for opening up the room for more people to come in to be a part of the healing. You know, I've been trying to track this from the media, the feeds since it happened, and it was tough. And so it was easy to understand why this was so important, and why you didn't have touch, and why the mainstream media has been so out of touch by tracking this very gripping story. So I'm so grateful that Commissioner Mapps' leadership was aligned to bring this to the dais along with Commissioner Hardesty this morning. And I do know that we have some follow-up work to do. I heard you. And I appreciate that you've already knitted together the fiscal agent. This is the beginning of this journey that we're on. We're this specific. situation, but it's a very long-term relationship since your community is such a vibrant part of Portland. I must confess, I'm a big sports fan. I hope this doesn't feel like it's going away from the topic, but I've always been aware of the Tongan community because let's just say any football team locally that's done well has Tongan players on their line. And if they have that, then they move the ball. So I've been noticing that for years. And so it was so great to be there. And also thank you for that wonderful lunch that I brought it home, and I made my spouse very happy that even though I was gone for longer than I thought, I brought home some delicious food from the Tongan community. So really, this is just my way of saying that I'm a better person because I was able to spend a few hours with all of you, a couple hours with all of you, and thank you, and we will follow through.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. And if nobody else has any remarks at this point, before I read the proclamation, I just want to share my thanks, my gratitude to the Tongan community here in Portland. I always enjoy participating in the Tongan Day of Celebration. I know COVID's made that a little bit problematic of late, but it's an important occasion, not only for the Tongan community, but for the community at large, to really celebrate and appreciate the mighty contributions of Tongans to the city of Portland. We're grateful to be here today, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to share this important proclamation and to share this moment together. Before I read the proclamation, I also want to acknowledge the great work of Michelle Rodriguez and Commissioner Mapp's office for working to draft this proclamation with a number of Tongan community members in Portland, as well as our friends at the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization. Thank you all. And with that, I have the honor of reading this proclamation. Whereas the Tongan Americans are Americans who can trace their ancestry to the oceanic country of the Kingdom of Tonga, there are approximately 67,200 Tongans and Tongan Americans living in the United States as of 2019. And whereas Tongans are considered to be Pacific Islanders in the United States Census and are the fourth largest Pacific Islander American group in terms of population after Native Hawaiians, Samoan Americans, and Gamanian Chamorro Americans. And whereas there are 1,300 people of Tongan heritage and descent living, celebrating, and working right here in Portland, Oregon. And whereas the Tongan community cherishes a multi-generational family structure and holds a tradition of caring for their elderly at home, which reinforces the passing of cultural preservation to their American-born children. And whereas the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hape volcano in the Kingdom of Tonga erupted on January 15th, 2022. And whereas the volcanic eruption launched material as high as 40 kilometers, that's over 25 miles in altitude, blanketing nearby islands with ash and triggering destructive tsunami waves across the Pacific Ocean. And whereas the explosion caused destruction and devastation for the Kingdom of Tonga and the Tongan community scattered all across the globe. And whereas the Tongan community in Portland is still unable to contact and account for all of their loved ones. And whereas the city of Portland recognizes the people of Tonga and their descendants in Portland and calls on all Portlanders to act and support their Tongan neighbors. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, January 26th, 2022, to be Tongan Day of Remembrance in Portland and encourage all community members to honor this day. Thank you all very much. And thank you for sharing your heartfelt stories on this important occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Malo.
Great to
Thank
see
you.
Thank you. All right, Keelan, with that, this is the Wednesday, January 26, 2022 morning session of the Portland City Council. Please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Rubio,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Hardesty,
Yeah.
Maps. Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video and channel 30. The public may provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. Council is taking these steps as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to conduct the city's business. And with that, we will hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder for those who may be tuning in, hoping to hear item 54. This is the report on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We will not be hearing that report this morning. When we get to that item, I will be pulling it back to my office. So if you're waiting for that item, I just want to give you the heads up. We're not going to be hearing it today, and I apologize for the inconvenience. First up is communications. Keelan, item number 43.
Request of Alex Sarusi to address council regarding proposal to ban the sale of foie gras.
Good morning.
Good morning. And first, if it's all right, I'd like to just thank the Tongan community for what they shared this morning and wish them a heartfelt Remembrance Day. Good morning, Mayor and council members. My name is Alex Sarusi. I am the State Policy Manager for Mercy for Animals. Mercy for Animals is a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a more just and sustainable food system for all. On behalf of our 1,000 Portland-based members, volunteers, and staff, I'm here to ask for your support for a proposed ordinance to ban the sale of force-fed foie gras in the city of Portland. Foie gras, what some consider a luxury food, is produced by force-feeding birds to create abnormally enlarged livers and is one of the most traumatic forms of animal cruelty. In fact, Mercy for Animals undercover investigations have documented the systemic violence against birds in massive factory farms. Considering the fact that all animals are considered sentient beings capable of experiencing pain, stress, and fear under Oregon law, the humane treatment of animals is of particular importance to Portland residents. Not only is the process of producing foie gras inherently cruel, it also poses public health risks. Due to the constant abuse they endure, ducks and geese have weakened immune systems, making them especially susceptible to avian influenza infections, which, as we know, can spread to humans and lead to disease outbreaks. Given the current climate, the city should be doing everything it can to actively combat the proliferation of another zoonotic disease. Significant opposition to the production and sale of foie gras has led to the enactment of similar legislation in places like New York City and the state of California. Currently, over 36 nonprofit organizations and 50 Portland-based restaurants support this effort to ban force-fed foie gras in the city. Portland has always been a leader in animal welfare, and we are asking that the City Council take action to stand against this inherently cruel practice. I recognize that the Council has been asked to introduce a proposed ordinance to ban the sale of force-fed foie gras for months now. Everyone who has spoken out has spoken in support, so I sincerely urge you to introduce an ordinance for the benefit of animals and the residents of Portland, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next individual, please, Keelan, item 44.
Request of Sarah Butler to address council regarding proposal to ban the sale of foie gras.
Good morning.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Sarah Butler, and I have lived in Southwest Portland for the last 9 years. I am here to support the proposed ban on the sale of foie gras from force-fed birds. Since other constituents have already gone into detail describing the cruel and unnecessary practices involved in force feeding, I will just mention that the handful of establishments in Portland that stubbornly continue to sell foie gras are the reason we need this ban. Other jurisdictions have already successfully implemented such bans, including New York City and the entire state of California, and I strongly hope to see Portland added to that list. One of the reasons I chose to move to Portland was because of the animal welfare movement prevalent here. However, I was sad to hear that foie gras has not yet been banned. The practice is severely inhumane, environmentally damaging, particularly in terms of water pollution, and also increases the risk of zoonotic disease outbreaks. Within the factory farming industry, foie gras production has the greatest risk of zoonotic disease outbreaks because the constant abuse of the birds by force feeding results in weakened immune systems, making them especially susceptible to bird flu infections, which can spread to humans and lead to disease outbreaks, and no one wants another pandemic. Therefore, a foie gras sales ban would benefit the animals, the environment, and human health without affecting Portland's economy, since not even 1% of our restaurants serve it, and those that do would see little loss in revenue as a result. In conclusion, I hope you will soon introduce and pass an ordinance banning the sale of force-fed foie gras in Portland, which would be an important stand against this inhumane practice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next individual, please, Keelan, item number 45.
Request of D. White to address council regarding Water Bureau's lead problem.
Good morning, Dee.
Hello, my name is Dee White, and I'm here today on behalf of advocates for lead-free drinking water. Today, I will be reading a communication I delivered to this body on June the 13th, 2018. The facts and circumstances remain the same today. I am sorry and sad to report that Portland Water Bureau continues to be the #1 large water system by population served, who is responsible for exposing tens of thousands of us to high lead in our drinking water. It is well documented how the effects of lead poisoning on babies in utero, infants, and young children, even at low-level exposure, are profound and irreversible. There is no safe level of lead. While Flint, Michigan suffered acute lead exposure 4 years ago, Portlanders have endured chronic levels of lead in our water for over 25 years. The American Academy of Pediatrics has called for no more than 1 part per billion in drinking water. The FDA requires bottled water to be below 5 parts per billion. In contrast, Portland lead test last year showed the highest level detected was 59 parts per billion. The year before that, it was 648 parts per billion. In the past 18 months, Portland has exceeded the EPA's 15 parts per billion limit twice. The Water Commissioner's opinion is that it's property owners' responsibility to prevent lead exposure by replacing the plumbing and fixtures in our homes and schools. He is wrong. Bull Run's pure water is naturally corrosive, which means it corrodes pipes, solder, and fixtures. Federal law requires water utilities to treat corrosive water so that lead leaching is minimized inside our homes, offices, and schools. The law is about correcting treatment effectiveness and not about faulting customer plumbing. This is your legal responsibility, not ours. The Oregon Health Authority has been letting you guys off the hook for over 20 years. Why is this? What kind of hold do you guys have over the regulators? We have a silent public health crisis going on here. This is a failure of leadership and gross negligence at many levels, but you all are the ones who are responsible, yet you continue to betray our trust by ignoring and downplaying this very real and dangerous public health threat. And I'd like to point out the bar chart on your screen. It's a 2021 apples and apples comparison of lead and drinking water in cities in the Northwest. Portland is the tall one in the middle. That's it.
Thank you. Next individual, please, item number 46.
Request of Portland Advocates for Lead-Free Drinking Water to address council regarding Water Bureau's lead problem.
Morning.
Good morning. Keelan, do you have the other graph that you can display?
Yes, we'll bring it up.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and begin then. Good morning, I'm here on behalf of Advocates for Lead-Free Drinking Water. A top national engineer recently told OPB that Portland is worse than Flint. It is inexcusable that Portland water's chronic lead levels have gone on for so long. The Portland Water Director has overseen 3 lead action level exceedances in 5 years, seemingly ignoring this matter. We've come here for the past 4 years to share PWB's alarming data and the science of lead in drinking water, but we are deeply concerned that the Bureau's deceptive marketing is keeping the public in the dark, even after Flint. 10 months ago, we met with Water Commissioner Mapps to inform him about the Water Bureau's 30-year inadequate corrosion control approach that has damaged plumbing and endangered public health. We shared with him the 3-pronged solution that cities use after similar crises, with filters as the first default response to protect customers. We again came to you, Council, in the summer. Finally, we submitted testimony urging the city provide water filters during the fall budget adjustment period known as bump. But what happened next made us fall out of our chairs. PWB municipal lead had doubled to 21 parts per billion during their October sampling period, far exceeding EPA's maximum limit for lead in drinking water. Since 2018, we have urged city-provided filters to protect customers until Portland Water Bureau looks like Seattle, you see there on the right, and all its other neighbors. Today, we are pleased to announce EPA heard our December 2nd urgent call for filters, even applauding our advocacy on behalf of safe drinking water for all. They reached out to OHA, who reached out to the Water Bureau for a plan. However, we need action. We need it now, as it's nearly 3 months since Portland Water Bureau detected excessive lead. Now, I would like to read an excerpt from public comment that we gave 3 years ago. After finding high levels of lead at schools in 2016, Newark Water and Sewer was forced to admit that improperly treated water was corroding pipes, solder, and fixtures, which elevated lead in drinking water. Newark handed out filters while optimizing treatment and replacing service lines. Portland, and that was at low or no cost to customers. Portland leaders could swiftly protect customers with filters. Instead, they downplayed the 2 temporary and ignored the 1 permanent fix. Mayor, other cities hold a press conference after finding alarming levels versus statements prepared by a communications team. Why are city engineers barred from us and reporters alike? The Bureau has declined to answer 2 of the most important questions. Why have drinking water lead levels doubled? And can you tell us how soon a new city filters program will be up and running? Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask one question? Because there is a point of confusion and I'd like it clarified.
Sure.
When you say lead in the drinking water, are you talking about the water that the city provides prior to it arriving at a household? Or are you talking about lead in the water once it enters the household and comes into contact with the household plumbing?
Well, as Dee White said in her testimony, lead is rarely found in source water.
So is that a fancy way of saying it's not in the city's drinking water?
It is in the city's drinking water. It absolutely is.
So
And that's
it's in
why
the water
even,
supply that goes to the houses. I just
Not
want to
the
make
s-
sure I understand
yeah.
this point of fact.
of course, I know this is how the Bureau has confused us for so many years. They often conflate source water with the finished treated drinking water. In this case, it's improperly treated.
But,
I can put
but
it.
does it have, by the time it gets to my house, I'm just trying
Right.
to figure this out, simple terms. When it gets to my house, is it your contention that as it shows up to my house, it already has lead in it?
It absolutely can have lead in it because, as you heard in
I
2017,
know it can. My
Yeah.
question is, does it, based on what
it does.
you're providing?
Absolutely. There is lead in the drinking water that Portland delivers to households. Lead is this is a very unusual contaminant. I believe it's the only, but it's at least one of the only contaminants regulated at customer taps. That means it's the Bureau's responsibility to deliver non-corrosive water to the tap so that the least amount of lead is leached out of anywhere that lead is present in the distribution system. Is that a little bit
So
more clear?
leached out of what? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. and I
Well, you can
appreciate
look at
that. So
Seattle, right? Seattle on the right.
Yes.
There is no difference. They have the same kind of corrosive source water. They have the same plumbing we do, galvanized, lead solder. But the difference is they treat the water properly so that it is delivered, so that you heard about acidic water, Mayor, in
Sure.
2017.
Yeah, of course.
So
Yeah.
they treat that acidic water so that it's not corrosive. It's as least corrosive to the infrastructure plumbing as possible. And that is per the federal regulation, the lead and copper rule. That is that is the foundation of the lead and copper rule. And it's the intent of that regulation is to deliver non-corrosive water. And the Portland has not been doing that since 1997 by design.
Okay, thank you. That's
Sure.
interesting information. Commissioner Mapps.
For Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to share with you and Portlanders that if you're concerned about how much or if there is in fact lead in your water, you can go to leadline.org. That's leadline.org, and the Water Bureau will send you a free lead testing kit. All you have to do is take a little sample of your water and send it into the Bureau, and then we will test it for you and get information back. And should you find that you have unacceptably high levels of lead in your home water, the Water Bureau will also send you a free filter. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank
Could I just say one more thing? Could I just say one more thing about the
Quickly, yes.
test? Sure. The test kits are a one-time snapshot of lead. Lead releases can randomly release. There's lead particulate that the Bureau engineers can tell you about. It can randomly release. And so one day's low lead test can show high lead the next day. So the test kits also take 4 to 6 weeks, I believe, possibly 8 weeks. It's a long time to not be protecting customers. That's all I needed to say about those kits.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you, Commissioner Mapps, for the information on where people can get a free lead testing kit. Keelan, with that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
Yes, we've had a request for 2 items, 50 and 51.
50 and 51. Got it. Can we please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda?
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. We will move to the first time certain item, please. That is item number 47.
Amend Title 33 Planning and Zoning and Title 32 Signs and Related Regulations to revise and update regulations for historic resources.
Colleagues, we have finally reached this important milestone on the Historic Resources Code project, sometimes known as HRCP, just because we love acronyms at the City of Portland. This is the final vote. Colleagues, any further comments before I call for the roll? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll for the Historic Resources Code project.
Rubio.
I want to thank the members of the Planning and Sustainability Commission and the Historic Landmarks Commission for all their thoroughness and commitment to this project. I know a great deal of work will be accomplished through future collaboration on our volunteer commissions. And I also want to give a very big special appreciation to Brandon Spencer Hartle, the city planner and BPS, who diligently led this project through 2+ years and many, many council sessions. So thank you so much, Brandon, for all your hard work and for working to make an inclusive process work. I also want to appreciate the public for participating in each stage of this project. From all the testimonies to numerous emails and conversations that helped to shape this policy. With these code changes, we can continue the work of improving our existing design regulations to enable more housing to be built. And also these code changes will also open the door for meaningful city investments to identify, honor, and protect the historic sites of Portland's LGBTQ+ communities and Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as well in this city. So I'm proud of all our work together in this package and eager to implement these changes to move us into a new era of historic inclusivity in Portland. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Commissioner Rubio, your staff, and as you mentioned, the incredible team at BPS led by Brandon, and also the Historic Landmarks Commission. There was a lot of collaboration. And Mayor, I did laugh when you said, we're finally here. It did seem like it's how these things work is what I've learned. So anyway, I really appreciate the commitment to advance this much needed regulatory changes and amendments to the city's Historic Resources Code. I'm particularly pleased that this code package provides greater clarity and alignment between the City of Portland and the new administrative rules enforced by the state. I'm confident that these changes will help ease the use of code within the Bureau of Development Services for both the reviewer and the permit applicant. Think about yesterday's work session. These code changes also provide necessary protections that focus on culturally specific historic resources, as Commissioner Rubio mentioned, that are connected to communities that have been historically underrepresented within the chapter of the city's zoning code. And finally, I'm pleased to see similar flexibility and options for affordable housing developments that are also in alignment with the options and the flexibility that I was championing last year in the design overlay zone amendments, that code package. It's nice to see the dots connect. With all of that, I'm enthusiastically vote aye.
Hardesty.
I want to also start by thanking the community members who showed up, who testified, who provided a written testimony. I think it's absolutely critical always to create an open space to have these conversations. And I also want to say conversations about whose history is to be preserved and how historic designations are implemented are absolutely critical to creating a welcoming, inclusive, diverse city that actually values all of our lived experiences. I also want to give a big thank you to BPS, Commissioner Rubio and her excellent staff. And Brandon is he's just a phenomenal individual who I laughed when I first heard that he was the Department for Historic Preservation. And what an incredible job he does. This process is necessary and it will continue to evolve as we move forward. But I think we have been clear that the status quo around historic preservation cannot continue without an acknowledgement of all the people left out, all the cultural institutions and neighborhoods who just aren't reflected today. We clearly need to balance the need to preserve our historic resources while building a better and more inclusive future for all Portlanders. And I know this is a difficult task, but I believe that the package we're voting on today moves us in that direction. I will be keeping my eye on how these code changes play out And I'm very happy to have conversations about the need for further changes in the future. For now, it is with joy that I vote aye.
Maps.
I want to thank Commissioner Rubio for bringing this important item forward. And like my colleagues, I want to acknowledge the amazing work done by Brandon. For these reasons, I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, first, I want to thank the Planning and Sustainability Commission as well as the Historic Landmarks Commission for recommending the well-vetted and I think very intentional package of code amendments. Thank you for that. I especially want to thank all of the many testifiers who provided this body with over 6 hours of, I thought, very nuanced, very smart, and obviously very passionate comments. Thank you. Through this process and this vote today, we're saying clearly that preserving historic places is important. They ground us socially, culturally, and architecturally. Historic resources also provide, as we heard from many people, fertile ground for continued learning, as well as for addressing past harms. But historic preservation cannot be a proxy for exclusion and cannot keep our city from overcoming the challenges of racial inequities, as well as addressing climate change. The Historic Resources Code project balances preservation and change, providing the opportunity for adaptive reuse throughout the city and ensuring that underrepresented stories are prioritized for future protection. I'm excited to see tenants, building owners, and professionals get creative with the flexibility provided by this new code so that our historic places can continue to inform us of the past and better serve the needs of future Portlanders. I'm very happy to vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. All right, so that is time certain. Let's go to the regular agenda, please. Item number 53.
Pay attorney's fees settlement from Merrick v. City of Portland litigation in the sum of $250,000 involving the Office of Management and Finance.
Colleagues, this morning we are considering a proposed settlement in a public record case involving the right to recover attorney fees. The trial court had ruled that the plaintiff was not entitled to an award of attorney's fees in this case, but the Court of Appeals reversed that ruling. This proposed settlement would resolve all of the outstanding attorney fee issues, both at trial as well as on appeal. It would also resolve any and all other outstanding legal issues and formally end the litigation. Before turning this over to our presenters, I'd like to note that the Office of Management and Finance and the City Attorney's Office are in conversations with my office to reassess and restructure our public records response. They'll be bringing a proposal to the full City Council that allows us to better deliver this service to the public. With that, I will hand this off to our presenters, Senior Deputy City Attorney Dennis Vinay and Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Carmen Merlot. Welcome. I'm sorry, it's Denny. I apologize. I know who you are. Welcome, Denny and Carmen. Thank you.
That's quite all right, Mayor. Thank you very much.
I obviously, the coffee, Aja's not here today, so the coffee machine isn't working. It's clearly impacting my performance, so I apologize.
Oh, not at all. Thank you very much, and good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Again, my name is Denis Vanier. I'm a Senior Deputy City Attorney and the city's appellate counsel in this case. I will address the litigation and the proposed settlement in this matter, and Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Carmen Merlot will address the broader impacts related to this case. So the proposed settlement before you today stems from an appeal involving the right to recover attorney fees in a public record lawsuit. And the basic background is the following. In 2017, plaintiffs submitted a public record request to the city asking for the names, the contact information, and the substance of reports from members of the public who reported to the one point of contact system for members of the public to report issues about campsites in Portland. The city initially denied that request, citing the personal privacy and the email address exemptions of the Oregon Public Records Law. Eventually, plaintiff filed a lawsuit against the city, the lawsuit in this case seeking an order compelling the production of those records. The trial court entered an order that actually deferred ruling on the merits of the case pending a remand process to the district attorney. The district attorney eventually ruled against the city and ordered the disclosure of the requested records, and the city did so. Following the release of the records, plaintiff then asked the trial court to enter a judgment in his favor and to award him approximately $50,000 in attorney's fees as having prevailed in the case. But the trial court ruled that by releasing the records to the plaintiff after the decision of the district attorney, the case had actually become moot, and the court entered a general judgment dismissing the lawsuit with prejudice and without an award of fees or costs. Plaintiff appealed that judgment to the Court of Appeals. And as counsel knows, the Court of Appeals reversed the judgment of the trial court. Specifically, the court held that the city's release of the records following the district attorney's ruling did not render the lawsuit moot, but that plaintiff had effectively prevailed in the lawsuit for the purpose of recovering attorney fees under the applicable statute. At that point, having prevailed on appeal, plaintiff then filed a petition seeking approximately $375,000 in attorney fees as a prevailing party on appeal. At that point, the parties agreed to submit the matter to mediation to try to resolve all the outstanding issues. And the proposed settlement before you today came out of that mediation. And as you can see, it would settle all attorney fees and costs, any remaining issues in the case, both at trial and on appeal, for $250,000, which is substantially less than the combined fee requests that the plaintiff had filed in the trial court and Court of Appeals. And in addition, I should note that the proposed settlement would end the litigation of the case, whereas otherwise further attorney fees would continue to accrue. So for those reasons, the city attorney's office recommends the settlement, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or to turn it over to Ms. Merlo. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Denis. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Carmen Merlo, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. I think it's safe to say we've certainly learned some lessons as a result of this case and have already put in place several recommendations intended to improve the city's performance in responding to public records requests, particularly on large and complicated requests. Some of these process improvements demonstrate that the city absolutely takes seriously its responsibility to provide access to public records. So the first thing we've done is implement a mandatory training for all employees designated as their bureau's public records responder. We've also adopted a policy that bureaus need to involve the city attorney's office on all fee estimates over a certain dollar threshold. And we're now requiring approvals at the bureau head level if asserting an exemption to withhold records. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge that the city attorney's office, who has been convening monthly meetings with the bureau designees for several years, have now also used these occasions to more thoroughly share best practices and debrief any particularly thorny or challenging requests. As the mayor noted, we are working with the city attorney's office now to put together a proposal that will bring forth some additional proposed changes in how we structure our public records process and make additional process improvements. So with that, Denis and I are happy to answer your questions.
Commissioner Hardest.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Denny and Carmen. And I just want to say thank you, Denny, for spending way too much time after the your workday yesterday with me, really helping me understand the uniqueness of this settlement agreement. I actually wanted to take a moment to really, because some of my colleagues weren't here, and I really want to make sure that people understand just how scary this was. This was at the beginning of COVID, when those of us who were privileged were required to stay at home. We were privileged enough to have internet access so that we could get our food and cleaning supplies. And in an effort to create some basic dignity for folks who are living on our street, we started expanding restroom opportunities for our folks who were living on the street. And there were community members who thought that that was the most inappropriate thing for us to do. And all that was going to do was encourage more houselessness. Employees were attacked with hucker. They were threatened. They were followed home. And so there's a disconnect between the city's desire to be intentional about public records requests, with the default being provide the information, to the environment that we're operating in, when we have white supremacists walking our streets, when we have city employees, public servants being attacked for doing the job that they do. So I am appreciative. Denny and I spent a lot of time last evening really talking about what can we as a council do. And I'm grateful the mayor is now starting a process, working on a process to actually put some real intentionality behind it. But I understand we could pass a ordinance that just says, as a city, we default to public disclosure, but with some exemptions. And I think we're going to have to work with the legislature to really change public records law so that we address the political realities that we're operating in. We are not the same people we were when Oregon's public records law was written. And we are not having the same lived experiences as public servants. And so, and I can tell you myself personally, I have been harassed. I've been way too much for me to get into today. But let me just tell you that the more diverse our elected leadership gets, the more diverse our staff gets, the more languages that people are speaking as part of their day-to-day work. With this political environment, if we're not making sure that somebody doesn't lose their life because they want to be a public servant, and we're protecting our public servants that are doing great work every single day, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And so this is very emotional for me because I know what it's like when we were in chambers and having white supremacists follow you around at the city in downtown Portland. So many of my newer colleagues should be consider themselves just appreciate the fact that you didn't live through that, but some of us did, and some of us continue to live through that. So a long way to say, I appreciate the city attorney's steadfast commitment to not releasing information that would have put public servants in harm's way. I am appalled that we're going to have to pay $250,000 to settle this, but I will. I will because we did the right thing. This was a values a stand, and I applaud the work of the city attorney's office. But this is not going to be the last time, because my office is overwhelmed with public records requests every single day. So we must find a better way to both protect public servants and also to release appropriate information much more efficiently and faster. I can tell you for 29 years, I couldn't get information out of the city of Portland as a community activist. So I understand both sides, and I've been on both sides, but the political environment we're operating in is radically different than I ever imagined I'd be operating in. And so our laws must address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mapps.
I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty for that background. It's very helpful. This case originated before I got to council, so I am still learning about it and trying to understand it. I believe I have questions for legal counsel to help me understand the current legal environment that we operate in. So based on there are lots of court cases here, but based on what the courts have said about when we have to release information and when we don't have to release information, do I understand it that, like, if a Portlander reaches out to the city to ask for help to address a houseless issue or a livability issue, we now have to turn over their contact information to someone file a public records request?
So, Commissioner, as a general matter, the answer is yes. In this case, the district attorney specifically concluded that several provisions of the public records law, several exemptions, did not shield this type of information here. And so again, the request was for names, contact information, and the substance of reports of individuals who had reported to the city's one point of contact system. And what the district attorney ruled in this case is that the exemptions in the public records law for confidential submissions didn't apply, that the exemption for information of a personal nature didn't apply, that the exemption for a public body in possession of information submitted in confidence, that exemption did not apply. The only exemption that was upheld in this case is a specific exemption for email addresses, but that was it. So as a general matter, the answer is yes, the Oregon Public Records Law favors disclosure.
Okay, I see Robert raised his hand. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Denis, for that answer. And just to connect the Commissioner Hardesty's comment to Commissioner Maps's question, that is one of the tensions and difficulties with the public records law, is that it can require disclosure of personal contact information for members of the public. It can require personal contact information for city employees, who, like, the employees are doing, the members of the public are reaching out for help. City employees are trying to help and doing difficult work. And under the public records law, their contact information can have to go out. And in the current environment and everything we are dealing with, that does raise some concerns. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're trying to, we feel like we have that information in trust. We're trying to be protective of it, but the law requires disclosure, and that's the environment we're operating in right now.
Okay, Robert, just so I'm clear, by contact information, you mean things like my name and address?
Correct.
Well, Robert, I feel like I'm in a dilemma here. I understand the need for transparency, and I value transparency. But at the same time, I also feel like this rule that the courts have imposed on us is a violation of the public trust, or at least I think the sort of unwritten contract I have with the people of Portland. I think when they reach out to Portland to ask for help with a livability issue or a public safety issue, I'm sure the vast majority of Portlanders expect to have some measure of privacy here. Can you help me understand how to navigate this difficult space?
Yeah, and you're right. It is a difficult space. And I think this case also helps demonstrate it in the sense that the trial court ruled one way in the city's favor, and then the Court of Appeals reversed it. And anytime you see that dynamic between the trial court and the appellate court, that shows you it's a tough legal issue because smart judges are disagreeing on it. And then, I have a lot of faith in the legal system and in our judges, both at the trial level and the appellate level. And I think they are doing the best job they can to interpret the public records law as it is written and as it's on the books by the legislature. And so when the appellate court comes down and says, this is our reading of how the law works, and if members of the public or the city council aren't comfortable with how the law works, our redress really is to go to the legislature and ask them for help, because they ultimately write the public records law. And if they don't like what the Court of Appeals rules, the legislature can change that. And that's really the remedy, and I think where the focus needs to be.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Now I'll just address my colleagues on council here. I sure hope that we can come to a consensus that we add this issue to our legislative agenda. This feels not right to me. I feel like the courts have done at least two wrongs here. On the one hand, they are compelling us to violate the public's privacy, and then asking us to pick up $250,000 in lawyers' fees. Also does not pass the sniff test, or I expect would not pass the sniff test of the people we represent. On the other hand, I'm not quite sure what we can do here other than the legislative fix. And I'll lower my hand because I see Commissioner Hardesty has her hand up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Robert. Let me just say that we have a short legislative session, so changing public records law is impossible in a short legislative session, but I do plan to present it to our legislative colleagues at our legislative breakfast tomorrow morning, because, you know, we want them to give it their best thinking as well. And remember, our legislative body is more diverse than it's ever been in the history of Oregon, and they are all having the same kind of issues impacting them, especially when there are organized efforts to discredit them. And public records request is being used as a fishing expedition for people who are trying to paint people, especially people of color and women, in ways that are just egregious. And let me also say, today, there's a public records request in now for people who gave us their private information in an attempt to get grant funding. We've made no decisions on the grant funding, but the media has actually made a request, which means it will be in the paper with people's information they gave to us in confidence, right? And so we have to actually figure out what is appropriate public disclosure and make that as easy and free as possible. And then we have to make sure what is actually not in the public's interest for us to release and would have detrimental impact either to individuals or communities. And so I think they are separate issues, but they're combined in public records law.
Any further questions, colleagues? If not, Keelan, do we have public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have one person signed up.
Very good. 3 minutes, name for the record. Commissioner Hardesty, did you just raise your hand again? No, good. 3 minutes, name for the record, please.
Jan Carson.
Good morning, Jan. Jan, are you still muted? There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My colleague Mariana Garcia Medina is actually on to offer the testimony. I was trying to stay in the background. Could the host please bring her on?
Sorry,
Jan,
go ahead, Keelan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Jan, it looks like there is someone else who is logged in under your name, and let me ask them to unmute to see if that's Mariana.
Hi, I'm here. I'm here to testify on item 55.
We're not there yet.
Yes. That's
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
about that.
Keelan, so that individual is item 55. So is there anybody who's currently listening who is signed up to testify on this particular item?
Jan,
item 53.
Jan, I see you're unmuted. So was there someone who wanted to testify for 53? Mayor, it does. Oh, there we go. Jan, you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
I'm sorry for the confusion. I was signed up for the JTTF report, but my understanding is that has been removed and for next week's agenda.
Yeah,
so I'm just listening in.
Yeah, if you could do me a favor, hang tight for about 5 minutes because I'm going to make an announcement on that as well. So we won't be hearing it today, but I do have some information on that. We'll get to it in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions on this item? Item 53, seeing none. Keelan, please call the roll.
Rubio,
I want to thank Denny and Carmen and the staff at the Office of Management and Finance, the City Attorney's Office, for working to settle this issue. This case certainly represents the tension between transparency and the privacy of community members who may not want their personal contact information shared for safety reasons, and particularly as some of my colleagues noted, in this highly charged environments of today and issues of today. I'm glad to hear we're making process improvements regarding the public records for the future, and also that we're not finished on working on this issue at a state level, perhaps as well. I'm also hoping sincerely that this doesn't deter public engagement and that Portlanders continue to come to us and with us along with their concerns, ideas, and feedback on all city issues. So like my colleagues have expressed, I have heartburn about this, but I also recognize the need for this settlement. So I vote aye.
Ryan,
Yes, thank you, Danae and Carmen, for framing this so elegantly, actually. I learned a lot, both from the legal perspective, and Carmen, I really appreciate what you had to say about what better practices can we employ as we keep adjusting in today's political environment and to avoid such lawsuits. So I know that's challenging and it takes a lot of work. And I just appreciate that we have a system in place that I heard about this morning. I really do appreciate that. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I am really grateful to the city attorneys who I know have been working really hard to try to do the right thing for the public interest. And this isn't the first time they found themselves between a rock and a hard place. I also want to thank Carmen Merlot for the work of the Office of Management and Finance. And I think we will be collaborating around our legislative agenda and how we can make sure that we are in fact putting best practices in place. This is a very, very complicated issue. And I appreciate our attorneys going to the bat to protect public servants who clearly were under attack at the time that this public records request was put in. Those attacks have not stopped. In fact, they've become more vicious. And if we want people to want to work as public servants, we have an obligation to make sure that their job does not put their life at risk. I vote aye.
Maps.
I'll be transparent here. I'm deeply disappointed in the court's ruling. I believe that the decisions which have been handed down violate the right to privacy of Portlanders. I find that to be profoundly unacceptable. And then to charge the city $250,000 in lawyers' fees even after we turned over the records feels downright abusive. Denis, Ms. Merlot, I don't blame any of this on you. I know you're good lawyers and I appreciate your diligence here. You know, we went to the courts and we lost. I think both the argument and I think we lost on some democratic principles too. I support my colleague's call for finding a legislative fix to this. And certainly we'll partner with you to talk to our members of the state legislature about why fixing this injustice is deeply important. At the same time, I do not see a viable option for doing something else today other than to reluctantly vote aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everybody. Next item is item number 54.
Accept the Portland Police Bureau's report to City Council on the 2022 Portland Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Colleagues, a few minutes before council this morning, I heard that there was an interest in including some information in the JTTF report, which was not included or which should have been included. And rather than try and do this on the fly, I thought it would be more helpful to all of us if we could have an opportunity for the chief of police to meet with each of the commissioners, make sure that if there is additional information or data to be gathered, that that information does get included in the full report. For that reason, I'm withdrawing this to my office. We are anticipating that we'll have a special council session on Tuesday at 9:30. And while we've been speaking, somebody's been talking to each of your chiefs of staff or your staff members to confirm that you would be able to attend that. Either way, the actual time and date will be noted on the council agenda that will be publicly released on Friday. But for the time being, assume it will be next Tuesday morning, 9:30 a.m. Thank you. And for those of you who are interested in hearing that report today, I apologize for that inconvenience. Next item, please. Item 55.
Authorize competitive solicitation not to exceed $2,600,000 for a body-worn camera implementation for police officers.
Colleagues, before we continue with this item, I'd like to make a formal motion to amend Section A in the ordinance to include Exhibit A, which is a draft of the body-worn cameras RFP and which was included in the Tuesday memo. The amendment reads, the chief procurement officer is authorized to facilitate the use of the competitive solicitation process in accordance with Portland City Code 5.33 to obtain the most responsible and responsive offers, providing contracts for the purchase of a body-worn camera system in a form similar to the proposal documents included as Exhibit A. This item begins the procurement process for body-worn cameras for the police bureau. I'm being told that before I move on, I should ask for a second and get a vote on that. Commissioner Hardesty.
I was waiting for you to do that. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the amendment? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye, for the purpose of discussion.
Maps.
Aye for the purpose of discussion.
Wheeler.
Aye, the amendment is on the table. So colleagues, before we jump into this, I want to be very clear. This item begins the procurement process for body-worn cameras for the police bureau. I want to be equally clear. This item is not about body-worn camera policies. Today's meeting is about procurement only. Public procurement can take a significant amount of time, which is why we propose to begin the process now. The body-worn camera project will also include opportunities for public input in the body-worn camera policy as it's being developed and as it's being refined. This ordinance also authorizes a pilot program so that the Bureau can test different types of technologies. Before any final contract is issued for body-worn cameras, the project will come back to the full City Council for consideration and approval in a procurement report. The Council's action on the procurement ordinance is just the first step. It's not the last step. Today, we will take public testimony on the procurement ordinance. We won't vote on it today, however. After public testimony, we will carry this item over until February 9th for further consideration. We will accept written comments from the public all the way up until February 9th. This afternoon, we'll also be hearing an item related to the DOJ settlement agreement and proposed remedies as a result of mediation with the DOJ and other parties. One of the remedies suggested by the DOJ and under consideration by the council is body-worn cameras. Like we're doing for this procurement ordinance, we'll also take testimony on the DOJ item later today, but we will also carry it over for a further consideration on February 9th. That will give both the public as well as the city council additional time to consider and comment on these important issues. I'll now turn this over to the Portland Police Bureau's Body Worn Camera Program Manager, Tammy Mayer, to discuss this procurement ordinance. Welcome, Tammy.
Mayor, excuse me.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the reasons I was waiting for you to take a breath was that I could ask if we could take a break. We've been and because I suspect there'll be a lot of people wanting to weigh in, and having a quick 10-minute break would be appreciated.
Without objection, we will take a recess. We will be in recess till 10 minutes past 11 a.m. We're in recess. Back in session. And Tammy, you are up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. My name's Tammy Mayer. I work for the Portland Police Bureau, and I am the program manager for the up and coming body worn camera project. There are slides. Megan, do you have those? There we go. Next slide, please. Okay, so the background on this program, PPB has been interested in and actively researching various options for a body-worn camera program since 2013. I became involved in 2017 and took over kind of the researching and looking at different options. And we've started and stopped this process a few times. Most recently in 2020, right before the COVID lockdown. In the last November of 2021, the DOJ stated in a letter to the city that the use of a properly implemented body-worn camera program would remedy the non-compliance that it currently cites in the settlement agreement that it has with the city. Following that, the city council approved a one-time funds not to exceed 2.6 million in the fall bump of last year. Next slide, please. So the RFP itself, I want to stress, Mayor Wheeler already covered this, but I want to stress it does not determine the policy that we will follow with the cameras themselves. It is basically an open letter to the vendors asking what options are available and kind of giving some specifics about what the city is looking for. And then those vendors respond. Once we post it for the vendors' comments, it'll be out there for 6 weeks for them to answer the document, and then we'll have 3 separate scoring phases. The first phase is a written response that the vendors will provide back to the scoring team, and we'll score those and figure out which vendors have the higher probability of meeting the city's needs. We'll narrow that down to about 2 or 3 of the vendors, and then we'll ask those vendors to come in and provide demonstrations, bring some of the equipment, show us the software on the back end for redaction and storage and stuff. And then following that, we'll pick the top vendor that we think is most likely to succeed, and we'll ask to pilot that vendor for approximately 2 months. And I currently have that planned for August and September if we can stay on timeline. We'll pilot those cameras with 173 officers, all the patrol officers at Central Precinct, as well as the new focused intervention team. During that pilot test, we will validate the policy. And once again, the policy will be written prior to us. We have to have a policy in effect before we get to this piece. And then we'll validate that policy and see how it works for the city. And then we'll also test the camera functions, the durability, ease of use of both the camera and the software. The redaction piece, which is going to be a pretty big lift, and the infrastructure that it'll take to store all these videos and transmit the data back and forth via either Wi-Fi or a hardwire connection. Full implementation is 636 cameras that we expect to sign out to our officers on the street, and that includes all the patrol officers, some of the specialty teams, and then we'll keep a bank of extra cameras in the office for when other specialty teams that don't typically go out to the street, but if they need to, they can grab a camera and have it on them to record as per the policy. Next slide, please. So for the requirements, we asked, I think, 124 specific requirements in this RFP, and some of the bigger ones I've listed. The ability to upload, store, retrieve, manage, redact, and disseminate audio, visual, and still images. Have a robust end user interface for complete administration of the system. A granular level administrative security with audit trails on every action so we can see who's doing what in the system. Configurable retention and purge systems based on defined rules. Data conversion into industry standard formats in case we have to pull that data out of the system and transfer it to other places. Fully integrated redaction tools to automatically detect and render faces unidentifiable as per the Oregon state law. Next slide, please. The ability to search and sort files to make it a little easier to find certain things. Upload multiple devices simultaneously. Multiple mounting options, either on the helmet, on the shoulder lapel, or on the chest. Capture images comparable to the natural human vision. A minimum record time and battery life based on our patrol shifts. Minimum 30-second buffering when activated and deactivated, and this is one of the requirements in that DOJ letter. Indicator lights to show when it's on, when it's recording, and when the battery is being depleted and needs to be replaced. Various charging options, whether that be in the car or in a dock and walk type situation where when you're off shift, you put it on the dock and it both simultaneously charges and uploads at the same time. Triggers for activation, when you draw your firearm or ECW from the holster, that it automatically turns the camera on if you have not done it already. Same with vehicle pursuit when you turn on the lights and sirens, and that is also a DOJ requirement in the letter.
Tammy, before you move on, Tammy.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question, and can you also tell us what an ECW is, please?
Electronic controlled weapon. It's basically the tasers.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tammy. I always appreciate you, Tammy, because I know how hard you work on these issues. And this page is actually where my biggest concerns are. We get what we ask for. And so my first question is, how have you worked with the Technology Oversight Committee to develop this RFP?
I have submitted the draft RFP to the members of the Technology Oversight Committee, and I have not received any feedback from them on changes to it. I am meeting with them. I've submitted all the paperwork to formally introduce this project into their intake, and I am on the February list to be in their February meeting for us to talk about it.
Thank you. And based on this slide that you're showing us now, I have real concerns with this RFP. Because one of the main objectives the DOJ has is that the data not be owned by Portland Police Bureau, that a third-party vendor would actually own the data and be the repository for the needs that that data would entail. So right away, I am concerned that we're asking for the wrong thing. And so because this RFP is going to give us what we asked for, and we're not asking for third-party vendors to explain to us how they are able to get information to the appropriate places they need it. I want to know how this data gets to the DA. I want to know how it gets to the training division. I want to know how this data gets to management so that corrective behavior could take place. What you're asking for in your requirements are not consistent with what the needs are that we have for this body cam program.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, on the next slide, it talks about data ownership, but most of those questions will be answered specifically in the policy.
Actually, I disagree. Tammy, I disagree, because if we're not, the RFP doesn't start off with a third-party vendor, then we are failing ourselves, because we're going to end up piloting something that we don't want, and then we're going to end up implementing it because we bought, 600 and some cameras. And so this RFP is critical that it goes out right and that it's asking for the right information. And this means that we've forgotten everything we did before and what we said we wanted, but we are actually setting it up so that it actually is an accountability system. And I don't see that reflected in this RFP. And I'm concerned that the Technology Oversight Committee, because we know there are challenges when the police go out trying to buy technology, and they need to lead this effort. They need to be able to give the city council confidence that we are buying the right thing and we are asking the right questions and we're going to get the right data system once we get it in place.
Could I suggest maybe a happy medium here? Because I actually, Commissioner Hardesty, I hear what you're saying, and you have passionately advocated for a third-party vendor to control the data. But I would argue that Tammy is correct, that is in fact a policy decision that the council will ultimately have to decide. So maybe the happy medium here, Tammy, is to ask for the capability to do both, to do either or both. Because what we're really doing here with this RFP is technical speccing the various products that are out there. Is there some way to potentially respect both of those as options for us going forward once we have had the deliberation around policy?
Yes, sir, we can look at it. From my understanding, the way these cameras work, the data is controlled because it's in a vendor system, like up on the cloud. And then the policy at the local agency determines who can see the data. If officers can review it prior or after doing their reports, if the training division can use it for training classes, if supervisors have a requirement to randomly view videos to make sure policies are being complied with. All of that piece is determined in the policy. There is no body-worn camera program out there, to my knowledge, where the vendor controls the data and decides those things. It is up to the police department or police bureau to make those policy decisions. And then the data is stored either on premise, like at BTS in one of our servers, or on the cloud, and that's how the vendor captures the data. But one of the BTS requirements is the vendor cannot go in and do anything with the data without being digitally escorted by members of the city, because the data is the city's data, not the vendor's data. They just control the system.
Yeah, I understood. And that's helpful context. And maybe what we can do, since we're obviously not voting on this, we've got a couple of weeks of breathing room here. Maybe there's an opportunity for us. And the reason this is coming up is the DOJ had indicated in a document that there are potential new third-party vendors who can help with the data management piece. And I don't want to put words in the commissioner's mouth, but I think she is suggesting that we don't want to foreclose those opportunities if it turns out one of those options is either more cost-effective or, from a technology perspective, just a better option for us. So I want to make sure that what I'm hearing here doesn't foreclose that opportunity, and I don't think it is. And ultimately, it is a policy decision the council will have to make. But I don't see anything here yet that suggests to me that that is a foreclosed opportunity.
But Mayor, I'm concerned that we have not brought the Technology Oversight Committee in from the very beginning, because we know that when we do big technology purchases without the assistance of experts, we do not do a good job of it. And so we have a commitment that was what was supposed to happen as per a budget note in our last budget, that the Technology Committee must be the ones telling us that we are buying the right thing or we're asking for the right thing. Because we just have a history of not buying what it is we really want and then ending up being stuck with things that actually make our job harder.
Commissioner Rubio.
Are we going to be able to get a report from the Technology Oversight Committee before our vote on this?
The meeting with the Technology Oversight Committee is currently scheduled for the 28th of February.
Commissioner Rubio.
So, Mayor and colleagues, I just wanted to offer too that our office is really interested in looking at this. And I know that we've been talking with some of your offices about making clear these distinctions before it comes back to council. So I just want to put that on the record that all our offices are talking about some of these clarifying the policy from this. So we'll be working closely together with the Bureau and with Mayor Wheeler and with council staff to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rubio. And I absolutely accept that. And I think it's also possible we could ask the Technology Oversight Committee to meet earlier just on the subject of body-worn cameras. I want to make it clear, though, that at the end of the day, the advice of the Technology Oversight Committee is critically important, but they cannot direct policy either. Ultimately, that's up to us. And I realize there's a lot of machinations here. We took 3 hours of testimony through the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing on Sunday. There will be other public opportunities. We have the DOJ being very explicit about what their expectations are. And of course, we have an obligation to bargain in good faith with our collective bargaining units, including the PPA, and they will have a say on this as well. So I assure you that there is nothing that will happen quickly with regard to policy, and all of it has to come back to City Council before we settle on any policy related to body-worn cameras. That is my commitment to all of you. But I do encourage us to move forward on this RFP as expeditiously as possible.
I do too, but if we limit what we ask for, we will limit the information we get back. So I want to ask
well taken.
Anything we could possibly imagine we'd want, and then see what we get back.
Point very well taken. Tammy, we have sort of disrupted your flow, but you're used to all of us and you're doing a great job. We'll let you go ahead and continue.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, if I may, I can work with your office. Maybe we can add an extra requirement into the 124 to with the wording that you're thinking about, to ask that question of the vendors as well. I think that's a pretty easy addition to the RFP.
Thank you. I'm good. Keep going, Tammy.
Okay, I'll call you or your people later today and work that out.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about triggers for activation. The next one's the ability to review and tag in the field, so you can add case numbers and basically critical like CAD kind of information into the system, so it's easier to find those videos. Next slide, please. Index multiple cameras to a single event. So if you have multiple officers at an event, you can index them all and be able to tie them all to a single event. Interfacing to third-party systems such as GovQA for release and possibly the RMS, so you can link a camera to the report. So when you go for that information, it has that all tied together. It needs to follow both federal and Oregon CGI standards, which are criminal justice information standards, which are fairly strict. It talks about data ownership, but I will talk with your staff on how to reword possibly that requirement. Compatibility with city systems and software, basically the standard city systems and software, Microsoft, those kind of things, and make sure it's all compatible. It must meet minimum encryption standards for the city. It must be a role-based security level, so people are set at certain roles and cannot access things that they do not fit those roles for. Must have training and documentation to go with the cameras and any upgrades to the system so we can maintain currency. Warranty and maintenance support, obviously, and an implementation plan. We basically asked the vendors how they would implement for the size of our agency and how we're set up in our precincts and stuff. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's my timeline. This is roughly a 2-year project as I see it. There are a lot of breaks in between, and a lot of that has to do with policy catch-up and coming back to city council and giving gaps for times for the vendors to do certain things and stuff like that. So right now we're working on the policy with the PPA, and that piece is going on separately from the actual RFP. I expect to release this, well, depending on when I get permission from council, it'll be out there for 6 weeks. So I had envisioned that the 1st of February through mid-March, we posted out there for the vendors to read all the requirements, ask us questions, and then provide a response to us around that mid-March date. Once procurement looks at it and gives it back to us, sometime after that, we do the scoring. And I have 2 weeks blocked out for the scoring of the vendor responses, because some of these can be fairly lengthy, and depending how many responses we get back. Around mid-April, we'll ask the top 2 or 3 vendors that meet the requirements we're looking for to provide demonstrations. I expect that to take about a week. Then we score that and we narrow it down and we look at who we want to, who we possibly think of moving forward with. At that time, we have a little break because we have to do contract negotiations for a pilot. We also need to do some training on the equipment. And we also have to prep the facilities central to make sure that the electrical and the IT structure are ready for this heavy intake of video. I expected the pilot to run 2 months between August and September. And then after that, we will do some policy adjustment based on what came out of that pilot and if we missed anything or wanted to adjust things. And then between October and February, we'll do that adjustment. We'll do contract negotiations if that is the vendor that we select and want to move forward with. We'll do some more facility preps for the other facilities, east and north, that will be having the videos upload at their location as well. And then my anticipation is to start the implementation around March of next year, and it will go through, hopefully not December. Hopefully we can get it done sooner, but I allowed 9 months for implementation because it is a lot of cameras and there's a lot of training and stuff to do for that. Next slide. What are your questions?
Well, Tammy, that was hopeful that we'd get all the way through the presentation without questions. Colleagues, any further questions at this point, or we can open it up to public testimony? Why don't we go ahead and do that? Keelan, how many people do we have signed up for open testimony?
We have 5 people on the call.
Very good. 3 minutes each, name for the record. And again, just the admonition, we are not in the policy phase of this, and there will be ample opportunity for policy discussions. Go ahead. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Keelan.
First up, we have Dan Handelman.
Good morning, Dan.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Okay, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, my name is Dan Handelman. I'm with Portland Cop Watch. Our official stance on the adoption of body-worn cameras is neutral. This is in part because many of our community allies think police should have them, and in part because on rare occasions they may be used to hold police accountable for misconduct. The ordinance before you today has many flaws, the most significant of which is that it presumes the Portland Police should be the agency charged with storing, monitoring, and retrieving video from body cameras. This is stated clearly in the financial impact statement. This particular problem leaves an agency that has revealed in the past few months to have members who released false information about a council member for political reasons, asked community members not to vote for that council member or for the district attorney, and who hid the existence of the violent and prejudiced training slide in charge of important data. But the broader problem is that the city is proposing to jump into a $2.6 million pilot project before the parameters of the program have been defined. In other words, until there's a comprehensive policy, the program should be put on hold again. The city is framing this as a means to return to compliance with the US DOJ agreement. In amendments the city hasn't even voted to adopt yet. That comes later today. Then those amendments must be approved by Judge Simon after he hears testimony if they are fair, adequate, and reasonable. There are many other parts of the DOJ agreement that could have been put in place before this formal process ended, such as hiring someone to review the 6,000 plus uses of force in 2020. Instead of accelerating that process and getting a report out immediately upon DOJ's request in April 2021, the city is now coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the first protests, meaning the ability to do a comprehensive review is being compromised. Aspects of the policies that will be different based on the kind of technology being requested include whether or not officers have the ability to turn the cameras on and off, and whether they can review footage after using force before writing reports or being interviewed. Until those issues are resolved, council should not move forward with this pilot program. We've said before, and we'll repeat this afternoon, if officers can review body camera footage before writing reports after they use force, the city should not get the cameras. As a final thought to those of you who shared doubts or if not, should consider the real purpose of the body cameras. A body camera points outward from a police officer and records what the community members are doing. It takes cop watchers, third parties recording the cops and the civilians to get a full view of what's going on. We have yet to see a study looking at whether cities which adopt body cams end up incarcerating an increased number of community members, and whether, as is likely, most of those are people of color. The documents you are considering today stress the main function of body cameras is to hold officers accountable. But if that were true, the police association would not be such big fans. The real use will be to spy on, criminalize, and over-police certain community members. Keep this in mind as you adopt the policies, and then sometime after that, start your pilot program. And I should add that we could have more input into the body camera policies if the police association negotiations were still public. And I'm also really disturbed by the ability of officers to review the footage in the field is one of the items that Ms. Mayor just presented to you. So I'm really hoping you'll put this on hold again until the policy is in place. I know it's not a policy discussion today, Mr. Mayor, but you need the policies in place before you buy the technology. Thank you.
If I could just respond to Dan, because he's always very thoughtful. I want to be very clear that the timeline we just saw, the pilot will not be in the field till after the policies have been adopted. Just to be clear.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but you're asking for the vendors to present you with possible technology when you don't know what you need the technology to do yet. The only way you're going to know that is if you do the policy first.
Well, and there may be additional features or different ideas that they bring forth as well. I don't think we're trying to limit ourselves here, but I do appreciate your testimony.
Next up, we have Mariana Garcia Medina.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon. My name is Mariana Garcia, and I'm the Senior Policy Manager of the ACLU of Oregon. Turn off?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
Sorry, my computer monitor turned off, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Thank you. Today, we oppose the solicitation and purchase of body-worn cameras without a fully developed body-worn camera policy in place. The City and Police Bureau need a relationship of trust and collaboration with the community. In the past several years, the city has created spaces to engage community members and stakeholders in matters involving public safety and the Portland Police Bureau, including the creation and implementation of the body-worn camera policy. However, the Police Bureau's recent emergency request for the City Council to approve an RFP solicitation process for a body-worn camera system undermines the city's commitment to community and the current policy-making process. The specifications of particular body-worn camera technology features and vendor contract can drive or limit the city's body-worn camera policy. For example, as Commissioner Hardison mentioned, if a vendor contract requires that all video footage reside with the vendor, the selected technology would not be then meet the city policy that requires that video footage reside with a neutral agency or body to protect the privacy of those captured in the video. If the city proceeds with an RFP process and purchase of body-worn cameras without a policy in place, there is danger that it will be a significant budget expenditure for the city that does not improve public safety or police accountability, and instead may pose grave risks to the privacy rights of community members. Police officers are endowed with significant powers by the city, including the ability to enter homes and encounter bystanders, suspects, and victims in stressful and embarrassing or upsetting situations. It is crucial that a policy is in place to ensure there is privacy and accountability. Police body cameras are not inherently a useful and desirable tool. It is the vision and policies that guide their use that make all the difference. That is why today we are urging City Portland Council members to hold off on the solicitation and purchase of body-worn cameras for PPB officers until there is a policy that has been developed and approved by the City Council with input from the community. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jake Doctor.
Thank you so much. And I want to echo the two previous people, Dan and Mariana. Thank you for your testimony. The city is moving forward on body-worn cameras, but I'm saddened by the lack of listening from many of our council. As Mayor Wheeler called out, we're also not talking about policy, but procurement. But I ask, how can we spend money before we know on what or for what purpose? I've heard Commissioner Hardesty say many, many times that budgets are moral documents, and policy should come first, used to guide decisions. Spending before thinking is a shoot first, ask questions, later reaction. Perhaps this is consistent with PPP values, as we have seen. But also, why does the RFP proposal include items for the PPP to be able to review and tag in the field when the community has regularly demanded that that not occur? Per the procurement, we also need to ensure that the RFP review conflict of interests, PPB or PPA stock options, making sure that we're not benefiting the police over the benefit to the community. I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty, who has regularly shown up on this issue for years and has continued to over the past weeks. In December, the Mental Health Alliance hosted a forum on body-worn cameras policy to provide a chance to hear our community's questions. This week, PSAP, as Mayor Wheeler commented, hosted a session, and Commissioner Hardesty attended and was an active participant as usual. I didn't notice any of the other council members attending that meeting. As a white cisgender ally to our community, you don't need to hear my voice, so I want to take the rest of the time to share voices from some who have shared from those events. At the MHA event, Disability Rights Oregon provided amazing feedback and gave voice to the community, often overlooked by the city. The people of Portland are making an enormous investment, said Casey. They shared a plan that called for many salient points. We need a clear policy to prevent harm. We need third-party storage, clear access criteria, and we need to prohibit officers from reviewing prior to writing their report. However, that's been included in today's RFP. The Urban League's Jennifer Parrish Taylor called for us to envision values and what we would like to invest our resources in. That's central to the discussion today. They called out, we want to make sure that a city that is more just and livable for all, where our families can not only survive, but thrive. The Urban League of Portland was initially a proponent of body-worn cameras, but due to a range of research studies finding no evidence that cameras reduce police use of force, we now caution Portland against adopting new body camera programs. It is not the best use of the city's limited resource. And the ACLU's legal director, Kelly Simon, said, the research has shown us that body-worn cameras do not prevent police misconduct. We want justice. Is justice capturing the death of Quantas Hayes on camera, or is justice that Quantas Hayes would be at today's city council meeting or providing testimony? Those are the things that we need to be questioning, and we need to be thinking about our RFPs. Do they fund community, or do they fund police further eschewing accountability? And as we know, 82% of Portland police officers do not live in Portland. Any budget or expenditure should be spent for community thriving, not police to cover their butts. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Mark Porras.
Hey, good morning. For the record, my name's Mark Porras. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a dirty hippie who lives in Northeast Portland. Mayor Wheeler, thanks for reminding us all that this item is about procurement of body cameras, not policy. I just want you to know that I understand this, and yet it doesn't change my testimony. I'm asking you to vote no on this $2.6 million one-time purchase of 173 body-worn cameras and related services for the pilot program. To be perfectly clear, this issue is not an emergency. And as the mayor noted, we don't even have policy in place governing the use of body cams. The DOJ is not going anywhere anytime soon, and body-worn cameras are nowhere near the last item on the checklist to get the city into compliance. This is an issue that folks think we can just throw money at to make the DOJ go away, but the real problem to be solved is the deep dysfunction, the ties to white supremacy, and complete lack of accountability within the police bureau. Many community members, including myself, do not trust the police, and our numbers are rising. You'd go a whole lot further towards gaining some community trust by firing cops like Brian Hunziker. Remember, before our police commissioner knew exactly what happened, he said this about the former PPA president. It would be my preference to terminate such an individual because I do not believe such an individual has the character required to be a police officer. That's how you're going to make communities safer, by getting dangerous and unethical cops off the force. As the only commissioner present at Sunday's community forum on body-worn cameras, I believe that Commissioner Hardesty has the best perspective on what the community is asking for. Again, I understand that this particular issue is about procurement, but since some of you missed the community forum, I want to point out that one standout issue, and others have spoken to this already, was the overwhelming community support for ensuring that officers write their initial incident reports before reviewing any body camera Mayor's and Commissioner Rubio's office sent representatives to the forum, so they've already been filled in on this. I haven't heard back yet from Commissioner Ryan's office to know whether or not he had a representative there, but I did have an exchange with Katie Meyer from Commissioner Mapp's office, who informed me that nobody from their office was in attendance, but they do all have access to the recording. So to reiterate, please vote no on this item, or at the very least, especially Commissioners Ryan and Maps, please commit to voting along with Commissioner Hardesty, however she votes, seeing as how she was the only commissioner present at Sunday's community forum. Thanks for your time.
Next up, we have Reverend Dr. Mark Knutson. It looks like
Sorry, it looks like he's gone.
yeah, it looks like he dropped off. So that completes testimony for this item.
Very good. Colleagues, any further questions at this point? Commissioner Hardesty.
Mayor, I'm curious as to why we chose an RFP route rather than a letter of inquiry route, where we could ask a series of questions to vendors and have them answer them. Because again, as we've heard from the testimony, the impact statement actually does not reflect the reason why we are researching body cams. And so I just feel like we don't actually have to do an RFP. We could do a letter of inquiry to get vendors to tell us what they have, how we could utilize it in the ways we want. And then we would get to choose. So I don't understand why we would elect at this time to actually add 6 staff for Portland Police Bureau and a whole lot of internal stuff without actually knowing what we could possibly buy. And then after we know what we can buy, then we can figure out how much staff we will need. And I see Dr. Reverend Knutson is back. And so maybe I should just hold my question and Mayor, and invite.
Why don't we have Tammy answer your question, then we'll get to Dr. Knutson.
So yeah, why aren't we doing just a letter of inquiry? Why the whole RFP process?
A letter of inquiry I've never heard of. I think you're referring to a RFI, which is a request for information.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a letter of interest, right? So you send it to the same vendors you would send an RFP to, and you actually just give them a series of questions to answer. If this is something that the council decides, yes, we're going to buy body cams, then what we need to be able to is to compare apples to apples. And that will give us a much cleaner response. I am concerned about all the things we're asking them to do, that there's no policy that says we want them to do. And so what we're going to get back is a cost of a lot of things that we haven't asked for yet, because we have no policy around it.
Understood. I really didn't consider an RFI. We thought about an RFP so we could basically lay out kind of the city expectations. Even if we ask for something and they can do it, it doesn't mean the policy is going to let us. So they can tell us how they can do it and if it can be shut off, turned on and off. And then an RFP doesn't tie us to moving forward. We can take that information, and if we decide at that point that these aren't going to meet our needs, we can stop the solicitation at that point. But RFI is not something I actually considered.
I would highly encourage you to consider that, because an RFP is an awful lot of work. And I, as somebody who ran my own business, that's a lot of work to expect a vendor to do, especially when we're asking them about so much stuff that we don't know if it will be in our ultimate policy. I would actually want people to tell us how they're unique and how they're able to meet the needs of Portlanders, right? What we're doing is actually doing kind of a cookie cutter approach. And it's not going to give us the outcomes we want. So I would highly encourage you to look into another alternative method that doesn't require vendors to just give us their selling packet that they give to all the other cities, but actually think about how Portland wants to implement these cameras. Thank you. I'll stop there. And as I know, Reverend Dr. Knutson is back. I'll be back.
Next up, we have Reverend Dr. Mark Knudsen. Reverend, you're muted.
I think after 2 years, I can get that unmute faster. Greetings, Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. We appreciate your work always, your dedication, especially in times such as these. I'm a pastor of Augustine Lutheran Church in Portland, as well as one of the founding members of the Albino Minister Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, and I'm a member of the steering committee along with our chair and colleague, Dr. Leroy Haynes, and others. So just briefly, I think you all know the AMAC has had enhanced MCA status in federal court for the last decade now, with the City of Portland, the Department of Justice, the Portland Police Association, and the Mental Health Alliance. And we've been in mediation sessions, and we've been in court sessions. And a lot of time has been put into this. We submitted to the court and to the Department of Justice our recommendations if the city were to adopt body cams for the sake of police accountability. That'd be the reason we were to do that, make this expenditure. But very importantly, it's been said many times over, policy really precedes acquisition and implementation. I know, Mayor, you said this is not about policy yet, but we can't underscore that enough. We have submitted our recommendations if that were to be done. And among them, most importantly, is strong community input. So I was glad to hear about the PSEP meeting the other day and those that have taken place. We're willing to work for that input as we have in the past. That has to be at the heart of it, especially communities that have been adversely affected by policing, communities of color in particular, and persons of various sexual orientations. So that's one very important piece. The second very, very important piece is that officers not be able to view footage before their reports are fully completed. That must be in any policy going forward. And the third is a third-party implementation and management. And I think we've heard that several times. We have others. These have all been documented and turned in. So blessings in your important work, but I really can't underscore enough the need for policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, colleagues, any further questions on this item? Commissioner Rubio.
It's more of a comment. I just want to thank the folks that have testified today and also acknowledge the council members and staff or Commissioner Hardesty and council staff that and bureau staff and community partners that all attended the public forum on the issue. I know over 100 members came out to the event to give us critical input on how to best show up as a city in the program. And I know that we're also one of the last major cities to hold these kinds of conversations on body-worn cameras, but I'm glad that we're having them in consultation with community. I just wanted to lift up that I know that several of my colleagues that I personally talked to take seriously the policy implications that need to be considered with our external and internal partners. And many of us are engaging in this way. And for this reason, I just want to reiterate that our office will be working closely with our council members and also just to make sure that we have the right language that takes these requirements into account to get the desired outcomes we want. And so this ordinance will be in alignment with those conversations. I just want to reassure community around that we're committed to that. And I'm confident we'll get there. And I look forward to seeing the conversations evolve and next steps.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Rubio. We're going to get this right, and I think it's important that we get it right from the beginning. And I wanted to say, I remember in it seems like forever, in 2019, when I showed up on the city council, the policy that was being deliberated was a policy negotiated behind closed doors in a previous contract with then Mayor Charlie Hales. And the parameters made the police own the data. They would have controlled who had access to the data. And I was committed to never implementing a body cam policy that did not provide for police accountability. And so I worked with council colleagues to kill what was then a potential pilot program. And what I see in the RFP is the same kind of thinking that went into the policy that former Mayor Charlie Hales actually worked with the police union and in the previous contract. We're not in the place we were when Charlie Hales did that. We're in a very different place, and we have specific needs around our body camera policy and what we want it to do. In my mind, the only reason to invest millions of dollars in a body cam program is to ensure that we have an accountable police force. And that is what the DOJ is requesting we do. And which means that the policy should follow the reason why we are doing what it is we're doing. As the mayor said, and as Commissioner Rubio said, we're not close to actually finalizing this yet. I'm looking forward to working with Tammy. I'm looking forward to working with my council colleagues so that we get this right. And I will say, as a community member who's been working on this kind of issue for over 30 years, when the statement talks about building trust, that's, you don't spend millions of dollars to build trust, and you can't build it with a tool. You build it because you have people who actually respect and serve everybody equally, right? The body cam's not going to rebuild trust. What's going to rebuild trust is having a police force that does not use excessive force against community members. That's going to rebuild community trust. And we have to do this right, because if we don't, we'll be stuck with it forever. And we have too many policies in policing that we're stuck with forever because we didn't do it right the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And I'll just put my 2 cents in here again. I appreciate the different perspectives on this. It's an important issue. I agree, Commissioner Hardesty, we absolutely want to get it right. I believe the process laid out here by Tammy is thoughtful. I think it's in the right sequence. I am very clear on the point that there are many public discussions yet to be had around policy. There's still many processes that need to be completed, including our collective bargaining, including continued conversations with the United States Department of Justice, as well as others in the community, and we will continue to honor those commitments. I also want to be very transparent, just so everybody knows where I stand. I absolutely support having body-worn cameras on Portland Police Bureau officers. I think it's critically important, not only for accountability, but also for community trust. But I agree that we need to do this right, and we will continue down this thoughtful timeline that Tammy has laid out for all of us to get it done right. Here at the beginning, I also understand that people would like a little more time to digest this issue, so we will not be hearing this item. We will not be taking a vote on this today, even though it's slated as an emergency item. What I'd propose is we continue this item to February 9th for a regular morning session. We could at that time take amendments or choose to delay it again, but it would be my hope and expectation that we get all of our questions answered and that we're prepared to be able to take the vote on February 9th. The written record will remain open. So if there's people in the public who are listening to this on one of our various channels and you're inspired to chime in, please feel free to do so until February 9th. And just to make sure I get this right, legal counsel, till what time? Till the beginning of meeting session at 9:30, or when should we leave the record open until?
Yeah, I believe the notice you provided already on the agenda says until 9:30.
Okay, and I want to be clear, the agenda I'm looking at says February 2nd.
Right.
I want to make sure that it is February 9th for the record.
That's correct, February 9th.
Very good. I'm just working off an old document, no surprise. All right, good. Thank you, everybody who testified. Thank you, Tammy, for an outstanding presentation. Thank you, colleagues, for your thoughtful comments.
And Mayor, if I may, before Tammy.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to really appreciate Tammy. Tammy and I have had the pleasure to work together for a lot of years. And it was funny. We had a conversation on Sunday night about the Technology Oversight Committee, and Tammy didn't know that they were all volunteers that were donating their time. And I wanted to make sure that people didn't leave that meeting thinking that Tammy was misrepresenting the Technology Oversight Committee, because she's the most honest person I've met. almost in my entire life. And I just wanted to put that on the public record. Tammy works hard, and Tammy knows when I ask questions, and Tammy's really good at briefing council, I will say, more than some folks. But when Tammy briefs, Tammy answers all the questions. There's never been any hesitation. And Tammy, I just want you to know how much I appreciate working with you over the last 3 years, and just how much I admire you, because you just answer the questions, and wherever they lay, they lay. Thank you so much for your service to the city of Portland.
Commissioner Hardesty, thank you for acknowledging the great work that our employees do, and you frequently do that. I think that's awesome. And so, since you're setting that standard, I'll add one more talking point to the Tammy Appreciation Day. Tammy, back in 2020, I suspended the body-worn camera program, and I want to be clear why. I supported the program prior to that. I supported funding in my prior budgets to make sure that we started the process of securing body-worn cameras for police officers. But I did suspend the program in 2020, along with every other nascent program we had in the city of Portland as a result of a $100 million budget shortfall. So we put it on ice along with every other pilot program that was currently under consideration. You took it with grace. You had put your blood, your sweat, and your tears into it, and you never once complained to me or to a member of my staff. And I think that shows what kind of a public servant you are. I think it speaks to your personal integrity, and the thoroughness of your presentation today is one more example of the amazing people who work for the city of Portland. And like Commissioner Hardesty said, it's an honor to serve with you. Thank you for your presentation today. So this item is continued then till February 9th during our morning session. The written record remains open until 9:30 a.m. on February 9th. Thank you, everybody. We'll now move to item 56 on the regular agenda. This is a second reading.
Adopt meter rate adjustment for the Northwest Parking Management District within the Restricted Event District.
Colleagues, this is a second reading of a non-emergency ordinance. We've already heard a presentation. We've taken public testimony on this item. Is there any additional information for the record? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Rubio.
I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty and PBOT for bringing this item forward. I'm glad to hear that this proposal has the support of the neighborhood and also takes into account our climate goals. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 57, also a second reading.
Amend Upper Northwest Parking Definitions Code to revise the definitions of long-term meter and short-term meter.
Also a second reading. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
I want to take a moment to just really appreciate PBOT staff. Anytime you can raise parking meter rates and have not one person come to council to testify in opposition, you've done your work well. I applaud the team that made this happen. I vote aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Back to the items pulled off the consent agenda. Item number 50, please, Keelan.
Accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $50,000 from State of Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development to update the Economic Opportunities Analysis Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Outreach Project.
Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance accepts an Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development grant for Black, Indigenous, People of Color Outreach as a part of BPS's Economic Opportunities Analysis, or EOA for short, update project. BPS will use this $50,000 grant to hire a consultant for specific equitable outreach and engagement with the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color communities on issues related to the update of the EOA. I'll now turn it over to Tom Armstrong, the project manager for BPS, who could provide more details on the grant and the project.
Good afternoon. I think Commissioner Hardesty was about to say something, and
I'll let her go
My
first.
apologies, Commissioner.
Oh, no, it's all good. Actually, I was going to just explain why I asked you to pull it off of the consent agenda. Not because I have any concerns about it itself, but I thought this is such a critical issue that I thought it was important that we have a public conversation about it. So, I'm on board, but I just want to know. Okay, we got $50,000, which is, not nothing, but how is it going to have an impact on the communities that it's supposed to serve?
Great, thank you. Very good question. And that sort of the intent behind it is what drove us to seek this grant from the state. So the EOA is a state mandated analysis that's part of the comprehensive plan. And the city needs to show or demonstrate that we have the zoning or development capacity to meet expected economic and employment growth. And with a new forecast out of Metro, our current EOA was adopted in 2018 as part of the 2035 comprehensive plan. And now we will extend that out to 2045. And the reason that we're doing this now is in 2018, that EOA showed that the industrial land supply was tight. And since then, all of the growth that we have seen in warehouses in our industrial areas, it's getting tighter. And so as part of this EOA update over the next 12 to 18 months, we're really looking to focus on some key issues. Again, employment growth, especially in the industrial areas where our capacity is the tightest. And at the same time, we have a lot of other demands on the land in that area, especially in terms of environmental and watershed health. We'll be looking at the E-zones along the Columbia Slough. We will be looking at the new FEMA floodplain regulations along the Willamette River, and how do we take the need to provide those protections into account with our industrial land capacity. And eventually where that gets us is, if that land capacity is tight, how do we create a long-term vision for shared economic prosperity, especially for people without college degrees, which is where sort of the industrial jobs really provide those middle wage quality jobs for people without four-year degrees. And if we have a constrained supply in the industrial area, how are we, what are the other opportunities? What are the programs do we need to support those opportunities? And then finally, specific to this grant, when we did this work as part of the comprehensive plan update, it was, pretty wonky inside policy discussion between the industrial businesses and the business districts, the Working Waterfront Coalition, and the environmental groups, and that tug of war that has gone on over the North Reach for many years. This time around, we're trying to expand that discussion, and we're looking to engage labor groups into that discussion, not just hear from the businesses, but also hear more from the workers. And because there's so much focus on middle wage jobs, shared economic prosperity, reducing the racial income disparities, we wanted a specific outreach to the BIPOC community about, where they're working, what kind of opportunities do they want in the future, and how we can support them going forward. And that's what this grant is designed to supplement our staff on the project and have a real focused effort with that outreach. Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you very much, Tom. That is really helpful. I'm curious if you have a TriMet at the table. I hear from industrial business owners all the time that the challenge of getting workers to those industrial sites at different times of the day and night, knowing that those are good living wage, family wage employment opportunities that people can't get to. because we know low-income people don't have access to the kind of transportation that will get them to those good jobs. I hope so. Are you talking to folks that actually about that kind of infrastructure opportunity as well?
I think, yes, we will engage TriMet as part of this. And I think that's the crossover between sort of the economic vision policy and then how that plays out in not only the zoning plan, but, with PBOT and getting sort of transit access and how our employees are getting there. We've done a lot of look about especially East Portlanders and where they work in the Columbia Corridor and all the way out to Rivergate and how are they getting there and the importance of those north-south transit connections. And that's how that's got on the list. And the PBOT TriMet discussions about new and enhanced lines on 122nd Avenue and 162nd, I believe, the north-south connections to access those jobs, just like you're saying.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we're having this conversation because I just think it's important that we don't leave out the fact that there are barriers to people getting to jobs that don't require high tech skills, but provide for a family wage opportunity. And living in a city with a 97,000 plus medium income is frightening for folks who are working $2, $3, $15 an hour jobs. So we have to make sure people get access to those good family wage jobs. So thank you. This is good work. Glad you're doing it.
Caitlin, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Colleagues, this is an emergency ordinance. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Rubio.
Thanks again to BPS staff and especially Tom Armstrong for your hard work on this project. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Thank you, Tom, for being here. It was very helpful to listen to your report. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
So sorry you had to wait so long, Tom, but I'm very grateful that we had this conversation. And thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for your leadership and your commitment to climate mitigation and good family wage jobs. I vote aye.
Maps.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Rubio and Tom for bringing this item forward. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everybody. Last item for today is item number 51, also pulled off the consent agenda.
Accept ongoing disbursement of State of Oregon statewide transportation improvement funds for Portland streetcar from TriMet and authorize a subrecipient agreement.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm taking this back to my office. I thought it had already been pulled, but we're pulling it back.
Very good. This item is being pulled back to Commissioner Hardesty's office without objection. Keelan, that finishes the morning agenda, correct?
It does, Mayor.
Look at that. All right. We are adjourned till 2 p.m. Thank you, everybody.